Originally I was planning to make this massive video, reviewing everything Silent Hill in a single package that was supposed to have a double-digit hour runtime. Silent Hill, Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, Silent Hill The Room, Silent Hill Homecoming, Silent Hill Origins, Silent Hill Shattered Memories, Silent Hill Downpour, Silent Hill Book of Memories, Silent Hill Book of Lost Memories, PT, Silent Hill The Escape, Silent Hill The Arcade, Silent Hill The Movie, Silent Hill Revelations. God. Silent Hill fan games, Dead by Daylight, the Silent Hill chapter, Silent Hill the Pachinko machine. You get the idea. But in all honesty, what can I say about Silent Hill that hasn't been said before? I mean, I can try. Silent Hill is like warm apple pie that gets colder and more disgusting the more you eat of it. Like, at first it just kinda gets cold, and then later, instead of apples, it's filled with snakes and radioactive spiders. There you go, that probably hasn't been said before. But the point still stands. Everyone and their mother has talked about it before, to the point where everyone knows everything about the last little square inch of anything Silent Hill. Honestly, making such a video would be pointless. And of course, nobody would watch a 15-hour video. I'm not here to talk about Silent Hills and what could have been, but let me make one thing absolutely clear, and in the process alienate all my viewers. There should probably not be a new Silent Hill game. Now before you raise your pitchforks, let me explain. Silent Hill has run its course. Everything that came after The Room, and for some people even after Silent Hill 3, has been bad or mediocre, with a few outliers like Shattered Memories. They weren't even able to properly port the old games. The HD collection was pure chaos.
To change the fucking font to Comic Sans in the HD version. Yeah, cause
People who didn't understand why Silent Hill was good were asked to create new games for a franchise that had already been done to death. My friend Devin, yeah I know, I bring them up a lot, recently made a tweet that pretty much summarized everything I think about Silent Hill now. I'd rather just have Kojima make his own horror IP than riding on Silent Hill, honestly. I'd rather have the Kojima, Del Toro, Ito project not be bogged down by an established IP with established story beats and concepts. Yeah, PT was fine I guess, but it wasn't Silent Hill. I love some of the Silent Hill games, but what is there to be done or said that isn't bogged down by the franchise's weight? I even think that if all of the OG Team Silent came together and made a new Silent Hill game, I really don't think they'd deliver anything mind-blowing or amazing like we'd hope. I'd rather they do something new to explore. Even my second favorite Silent Hill game, Shattered Memories, was basically shat on because it was not the true Silent Hill experience, or some dumb shit. Like, what more can we do with this franchise aside from preserving the older games for new players? And I pretty much agree with that. Aside maybe from the Kojima thing, I don't think the recent storytelling of Death Stranding was that great, and it bothers me a bit that some people, including Kojima himself, think that people who didn't like the game just didn't get it, and fail to see that you can understand something and still dislike it. It's actually kinda hilarious to me because I distinctly remember Twilight fans coming up with the exact same excuse in 2008. It's just a moot point. The gameplay wasn't anything special like Kojima would want you to believe, and in fact, while it was quite fun sometimes, some indie devs actually recreated the whole thing in a matter of weeks. Don't get me wrong, it has an okay story, but mostly there's just lots of it, and it takes itself very, very seriously, so everything that is a little funny about it is amplified. Honestly, personally, I'd rather not have Kojima work on a new horror game franchise, but that's just me. So, what else can be done? Overall, it's probably pointless to talk about these things, as they will most likely, eventually, make a new game in the franchise, or remake the old games to keep milking it dry. like every other company is doing these days, like we're on fucking member berries or something. Silent Hill, Pyramid Head, Pyramid Head. So instead I was wondering, what could you come back to that's potentially different to anything else that has been done before? Now that sentence seems like a paradox. Come back to something that hasn't been done before. But if there is a game that would fit that seeming paradox of a sentence, it's the most different game of the original Team Silent games. Silent Hill 4: The Room. This game is so different from the other three that came before it. It is also the game that did the worst and made Konami disband Team Silent so Western developers could give it a shot, and we all know what came of that. And the cult isn't the pivotal point of the story, which in my eyes is a plus. I never really liked the cult story in Silent Hill. In fact, I think it's the most boring part of the franchise, which is why I liked Silent Hill 2 so much. It proved that there could be more within Silent Hill than just the Doomsday Cult. I always disliked that they kept coming back to it. If you haven't played The Room before, you might be scratching your head asking yourself, Silent Hill minus Town of Silent Hill minus Cult equals... Huh? I guess I should just start from the beginning here. The game starts with this really creepy intro sequence. I'm a fan of grainy footage that's just good enough so you can make out that something's wrong with it, but not good enough so you can make out any details. I think it's actually perfect for these older Silent Hill games because the dated graphics are almost entirely cancelled out. Some indie games today try the same style by layering VHS filters on top of their PS1 style games, but in those games it usually just works best by turning those annoying filters off completely. In The Room, you are stuck in a room, what a surprise. But when I mean stuck, I don't mean hikikomori stuck, you are literally stuck. The door is chained shut. What the fuck? Don't you lie and tell me that isn't a unique and interesting premise. The game is basically cut in two parts. First you have these first-person sequences where you explore the room. I can only imagine how creepy or how safe they could make this place feel with more modern graphics like in PT or Resi 7. Personally, I'm not that big on modern graphics. Most of my favorite games come from the era between 2000 and 2010, but man, I would be lying if imagining this with PT or Resi 7 style graphics wouldn't be interesting. In this room, you store your items, look outside the window, and interact with objects and kind of just live here. You can even just call phone numbers you see outside your window. Of course, when somebody picks up, it sounds like, but I really like this. This is actually part of a puzzle later on too. In a future video, I might talk more about the specific aesthetic that I like that nobody really seems to share with me, but to keep it short, I really like the dreamlike, living in an apartment feel they portray here. But there's more to it. You can see people through the peephole, just living their lives and even talking about you, and nobody seems to be able to hear you. Almost as if you live in a different reality, with the door being a veil thin enough for you to look outside, but a literal metal door from the outside. It's fascinating. Oh, and I guess there's a hole in your room that progressively gets larger with creepy voices coming out of it.
What the hell? Somebody in there?
The landlord probably should have mentioned that. Anyway, this is where the second part of the game comes in. You go into the hole and the game changes completely. This is more like your traditional Silent Hill game. The special enemies this game has are these ghosts that cannot be killed. These are honestly really annoying when you are trying to search an area. You can temporarily knock them down or later in the game lock them into place with holy swords, but there are only 5 swords in the whole game, and while you can get the sword back whenever you feel like it, you better make sure you make good use of them. And here's the catch. There are levels to this game. The apartment room sort of acts like a safe room hub world between levels where you heal up for free and stash items, but it's also essential to certain puzzles. It's a way cleverer idea than Silent Hill Origins world hopping in my opinion. The game also gives you very little healing items in comparison to the other Silent Hill games, because you can heal for free in the room. So you go back and forth between the worlds, stashing items, healing, saving, and solving puzzles, and your safe space slowly stops being so safe. First, it's only small things, like a weird diary entry under your door or strange texts from the previous person living here, but eventually things get more severe. Things start to... Is there someone in my shower? Well, this seems normal. What's wrong with my washing machine? Oh, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. What the fuck? So eventually the ghosts start to haunt your room, merging the Silent Hill world and your safe space into one, and you can't heal here anymore. And I think this is the true genius of this game. They give you this safe space for the entire first half of the game. They make it a place you feel at home, comfy, and that you want to return to. But then they very gradually turn it into a space you have to return to. This is such a genius move. I mean, seriously, imagine if in Resident Evil 7, at the halfway point of the game, all the save rooms had an unkillable monster in them. Not only does it turn the game around 180 degrees and breaks the game cycle, but it also makes no place feel safe anymore, and in turn makes the whole game a lot harder and introduces a set of new gameplay mechanics and rules. During gameplay, you can find a limited amount of these holy candles that you can use to protect your apartment's vital spots like the storage and the save book. You can put down these candles and buy some temporary relief. And the dread seeing those candles slowly burn down is real. You look at your storage like, man, I have like 2 or 3 more of these, but still place another one down because you have to. A lot of people probably won't like this sort of resource management. And I get it, you can fuck yourself over completely. But for me, it adds to the atmosphere. Having to protect the limited space of your once so safe room with limited resources while having to manage your healing items too makes this a dreadful experience in a much different way than Silent Hill usually is. Maybe this is a personal thing. Home invasion is so terrifying to me. Someone breaking into your safe home leaves a lot of mental scars, and coming back to your room that isn't even all that safe anymore makes you really paranoid about everything. The reason I like this is the same reason I like Welcome to the Game too. It makes playing this game really uncomfortable, and in my personal opinion, that's in a good way. Although I do understand if you hate this stuff. Of course, the game's atmosphere is still very Silent Hillish, with its cutscenes and very slow and synthetic voice acting.
This is my dream, and you don't even know my name. It's Cynthia.
Your dream.
That's right. This is just a dream.
Save for the few outliers, like in every Silent Hill game.
Eileen, relax!
The superintendent's name is Sunderland? Well, either Jamesy Boy didn't tell us about his daytime job, or I have a certain Australian to ask a few questions. Or maybe it's just an unrelated person called Sunderland and this is an Easter egg. The story is also very unique in that it focuses on the mass murderer Walter Sullivan, who only gets mentioned in passing in the past Silent Hill games. And I think that's a really clever idea too. A mass murderer born in Silent Hill? That's perfect food for a story that doesn't need a stupid cult. The gruesome murders where you can never quite see the killer and numbering the bodies is all pretty creepy. I was really happy when I found out that this game doesn't have Pyramid Head in it, and they opted to go a completely different route with its nemesis, using a literal dead serial killer instead. Of course, the music is always legendary. You know. This one especially has one of the more famous songs with vocals in it called Room of Angel. Oh man, that song gives me shivers, especially in that Cynthia death scene. The other songs are all really good too. I mean, just look at the cover of the soundtrack album. You take one look at it and you go, oh yeah. Akira Yamaoka, man. Akira Yamaoka.
Are you okay?
Are you okay? What the fuck do you think, Henry? What do you think? What's he supposed to say? Oh yeah, Henry, I'm good. I just made a mess with a strawberry sandwich? I also thought it was a fun touch how Henry draws his own map. In other games, the protagonist usually just draws on pre-existing maps that he finds around the game. When they encounter a locked door or some road that dropped into a bottomless pit, like, you know, roads do, they'll just mark it. But not Henry, no. Henry literally draws the entire map by himself while he explores. That's some skill and dedication right there, but it's smart. Just be thankful ink management isn't part of this game. Yeah, let's peep on our cute neighbor. To make sure she's okay, of course. That's an odd stuffed animal. And then of course there's this very infamous room that all the YouTubers plaster on their thumbnails.
Oh, I don't like this.
You know, sometimes I'm kind of happy I don't have to give a shit about monetization anymore.
Und sagt nicht mal irgendwas.
But honestly, there aren't that many great subtle moments involving sound anymore like in Silent Hill 2. With crying in corners that are never followed up on. Or stuff like that. It does have some scenery that is never explained, but it's not as subtle and it's not as creepy just having a gooey floor as, say, having a mirror room slowly consuming your real self like in Silent Hill 3. Oh, do you guys remember that creepy whispering nobody from the dev team could remember that sometimes shows up in Silent Hill 2 and sometimes doesn't? Yeah, you won't find moments like this here. The sound design is generally kind of hit or miss, I must say. For one, the horror music only plays whenever you are really close to an enemy. So you might just sit there, wave to an enemy far away, and you won't hear anything. And then you'll pass an enemy, get like 1 second of music, and then it's gone again. It's just very weird. And also the same ambient sounds repeat over and over again if you leave and come back.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a bug or anything, but if you hear the same sound every time when you enter an area, it kind of pulls you out of the immersion a little bit. Which is a shame because Silent Hill was always one for those moments and those ambient sounds. I think that's one of the bigger flaws this game has. Like, do you remember the time in Silent Hill 2 where you can hear Pyramid Head pulling his great knife along the floor? It happens once before you ever see him, and it never happens again here. In Silent Hill 4, these ambient sounds play every single time you are in the same area. And that kind of sucks, actually. Against popular belief, Silent Hill 4 The Room was always supposed to be a Silent Hill game. In a sense, this is true because the game began life as simply Room 302. However, it was always at least a spin-off of Silent Hill, and the most important thing was simply that it be different to the previous games. They also said this: even though the Silent Hill 4 project was a proper sequel to the Silent Hill series, our top objective for the game was change. And really, I think they completely accomplished that. Silent Hill The Room is certainly very, very different from the previous installments, and I think in a good way. Some of the criticism I feel are justified. For one, you have to backtrack a lot to the room. I can't help but think that that was intentional to make the room feel more like your safe room or safe space, but I get the criticism, and while I was playing it, I was getting a little annoyed too. The later levels are more of an escort mission, where your escort can't go certain ways, and additionally her weapon take an extra slot in your precious inventory space. Yeah, I forgot to mention your inventory space is limited. That also kind of sucks sometimes. The levels repeat halfway through, the ghosts are more annoying than anything else. Even though they still look kinda creepy, those complaints are valid and I completely agree with them. There are a lot of those, and I get that. You certainly can criticize this game, and it's definitely not perfect. But then there is that other criticism that basically boils down to, it's different, or this is not Silent Hill. At which point I can't help but think, do we really want the same game over and over and over again? And apparently some people want that. Silent Hill Shattered Memories faces the same fate, despite having a really interesting psychological concept. And honestly, I don't want the same thing over and over again. I actually think it's quite weird you would like such an interesting game like Silent Hill 2 and want the same thing again and nothing new that's interesting. You can only do the same thing so many times until you run out of ideas and it starts sucking. That unexpected change in twist, paired with the genius gameplay mechanic of The Room, make this game really special and awesome, in my opinion. Trademark. I think it's a shame that Konami disbanded Team Silent and The Room is largely pushed aside. Usually people talk about the first 3 Silent Hill games. Comparing the creativity of Silent Hill 4 The Room and the last few major entries in the series like Homecoming and Downpour, I think it's fairly obvious which one is creepier and the more interesting game, despite the dated graphics. Obviously, Konami will keep milking the franchise until it's really dead, but the point is that even if Team Silent came back together and were asked to make an all-new Silent Hill game like the old ones, they would still be shackled to the work they did 17 years ago, I feel like developers shouldn't be tasked with making the next Silent Hill like the old ones, but instead be asked to create games they want, influenced by Silent Hill. Hey, you can even still call it Silent Hill if you really want to milk the franchise. I mean, it worked for Resident Evil. Resident Evil 7's beginning was one of the best horror game experiences I've ever played. Of course, later you get guns and the game becomes a little less cool, but the point still stands. I mean, PT was a great step in the right direction, and as much as I like Norman Reedus, I don't think we need a celebrity to take the main role of a horror game protagonist. Just have a small team and tell them, go nuts and see what comes of it. Obviously, it often isn't the employee's choice what they want to make. But even more obviously, if a creator's heart isn't in his creation, it will inevitably suck. I guess I should have just said that in the beginning and saved us all time by making a Twitter post. Actually, I think I made another game review again in the process. Shit. Well, anyway, this is just all talking and opinionated rambling, so I'll stop here. Right now, Phasmophobia is the next big horror thing that doesn't even have a main character. Or a story for that matter. So, who knows what will happen? Maybe an indie dev will make the new greatest horror game franchise of all time. Whatever the case, thank you all for watching this video.
Promise.